This is Lino. Would be the official video for this channel. So let's get started. This one I'm going to title Free Nietzsche Part 1, Understanding the Situation, Understanding Our Opponents. Okay, so at the beginning of the 20th century, we have developing a school of thought called post-structuralism, which basically says that being is text, language is everything, it's all language, it's all signs, okay? There's a couple of figures out there. One is, or was, Einstein's cousin, Ludwig Wittgenstein, and there's another figure, Jean Grenier out of France. Now, Grenier, I'll just use him as an example for this kind of school of thought that really takes off later on, that we even find in Donna Haraway, for example. The world is language, the world is as language, that being is text, and that phenomena are already interpreted and is to be interpreted by us. So, you have a multiplicity of signs that come about through that is the phenomena. There isn't a kind of substrate of reality, a kind of foundation. It's just a mixture of all these signs that shift, slide, exchange into this kind of dizzying array. And we have to decipher that. We have to interpret the world. That's how we come to understand it. It's almost like tracing out the world, understanding it in this type of way. Okay? But we have to keep in mind that signs are basically like symptoms. Even if we look at language, it would be considered as symptoms, like say in psychoanalysis, psychotherapy. We treat the way in which language is expressed as forms of symptoms. Is there anything beyond this? I mean, is that all we're supposed to be doing? Like interpreting the world, interpreting the reality? Some people say that. Some people who actually read Nietzsche reduce him only to language. Jean Grenier does that in a work that's in here called from the new Nietzsche book. It's called Nietzsche's Conception of Chaos. He's essentially just saying this: it's language is the world, being as text. That's it. So from here, we do have a couple of responses to this, that there is something beyond just interpreting reality in this way. One is actually called a hermeneutic, or hermeneutics as suspicion. What we find here is the one performing hermeneutics approaches the world as symptoms suspiciously. That's to say, critically, not being naive to what is presented before one. Okay, seeing that there is no essence or depth to be sought after. Okay, but the one performing a hermeneutics of suspicion is not dynamic and ever holds too dearly in looking too hard at the world, in approaching the world suspiciously or critically. The hermeneutics of suspicion also holds that there is a correct orientation to life, in the form that the world or life is only meant to be read and interpreted. Okay, so we're already finding some problems with this type of approach. It's this kind of very puritanical approach to looking at the world. Michel Onfray will show a connection in his book, The Atheist Manifesto. Let's find it here. Now, he shows that there is a connection with hermeneutics and what Nietzsche calls the aesthetic ideals, which he's referring to these kind of images of purity, of the pure life, the ideal type, okay? And what we find is hermeneutics is intimately linked to aesthetic ideals. Its will to power is religious. In its correct meaning of the world or life, hermeneutics has an obsession with purity, right? There's only the correct way of looking at material reality, and that is by interpreting it or reading it, okay? So Michel Onfray says this: the marriage of licit and illicit works in parallel, with a coupling of pure and impure. What is pure or impure? Who Who is, who is not, which individual decides these questions, who authorizes and validates the decision. Pure designates the unmixed. Okay. Its opposite is the alloy. On the side of the pure are the one, God, paradise, mind, spirit. On the other side of the barricade are the impure, right? The diverse, the multiple, the world, the real, matter, body, flesh. The three monotheisms share the vision of an ideal world and hold the physical world in low esteem. So we treat material reality as not that much important. We want to try to dissociate what these guys are actually doing, what Onfray is accusing, the three monotheisms. I would be aligning this with post-structuralism. That's the opponent that I'm kind of like building up to. That we are putting material reality aside or depreciating it, and we're supplanting it with a kind of ethereal, disembodied voice, language, signs. Okay. So another problem is that we tend to confuse material processes with the processes of language. Manuel de Landa talks about it in his great, just awesome work, Intensive Science and Virtual Philosophy. Highly recommend getting this stuff. I did work with him in correspondence when I was doing my master's thesis. Great guy, okay? So let's see here. What de Landa has to say about this is that, in interpreting all processes as processes of language, a problem arises in the level of understanding and accounting for differing material processes. What is implicated in interpreting every aspect of life, both non-organic and organic processes, as synonymous to language is that one thinks that there are similarities of processes that are the same from language to the other processes of life. In assuming there are similarities of processes that are synonymous to language in every aspect of life is to slip essences through the back door. These essences are not essences of objects, but essences of processes. So he talks about that on page 10 of his work. Okay. Now, some other problems that arise from this is if we're going to be doing that with language and material reality, what it's also doing is it is neutralizing language. A language-only approach neutralizes material processes, and if we're going to take it even further in terms of what it's capable of doing, a language-only approach also neutralizes political action. I mean, if, being is text and we're just interpreting signs all over the world, what can we really do? Use harsh language? Is that the effect that it's going to create? Not that much. Or even Donna Haraway would say, oh, well, we're going to create more kind of counter myths, counter stories, and use them as political tools to get our points across. As we have been seeing since the 80s, or even going all the way back to the 60s, it's not too effective. Now, again, I mentioned earlier that in this kind of post-structuralist movement, there are those who have, kind of aligned Nietzsche to this path that being is text and language, he's just only about language only. You will find this quite a bit by people who cherry pick, reading Nietzsche, or cherry pick, especially if they do this, cherry picking Foucault, right? And just saying, oh, he's all about language, he's just documenting things, and there's nothing else capable for his work. You find this quite a bit in American academia. And again, that just neutralizes, domesticates, as Nietzsche would say, domesticates Nietzsche, domesticates and neutralizes Foucault to become really nothing but ineffectual, just talking heads. That's it. Okay. But when we really do our research, when we don't cherry pick Nietzsche, we don't cherry pick Foucault, what we do find are some interesting things that would contradict a lot of what American academia would be saying. So right out of Nietzsche's genealogy of morals, we have something that could contest this kind of domesticated, meekish approach. So Nietzsche says a quantum of force is also a quantum of drive, will, action. In fact, it is nothing more than this driving, willing, acting. And it is only through the seduction of language and through the fundamental errors of reason petrified in it. Language which understands and misunderstands all action as conditioned by an actor, by a subject, that it can appear otherwise. Okay, so that's from Nietzsche's Genealogy of Morals, first essay, section 13, page 29 on the Oxford Classics work. So, those who have, read Nietzsche, cherry-pick Nietzsche, and even Foucault, and even others, and saying, everything's language, we could see, or we can imagine what is going on if we really are to take them, at their word and seriously in this way. So we could imagine then Nietzsche almost being tied up, sequestered, and his works are cherry-picked in this way. He's sequestered, he's reduced to language. He's not telling us to do anything with our lives to change ourselves. He's just telling stories. So we can see Nietzsche then under American academia as sequestered, tied up, almost being, like held at ransom and being filmed. And the only thing he can do is just talk because he's tied down. So in this way, to complement the title of this video, part one of it anyway, is Freeing Nietzsche. We're breaking the ropes, cutting the ties with this post-structuralist approach, this language-only